Welcome to the 99 Podcast, a ministry of Crossroads Grace Community Church in Manteca, California. I'm Heather Mahoney, and I'm excited that you're joining us for Season 2 of the 99 Podcast. We hope it challenges you and creates a hunger to dive deeper into Scripture so you can know Jesus better. Welcome to today's episode. Hey, we're unpacking Daniel chapter 3. We've got the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And King Nebuchadnezzar builds the giant, massive golden statue, demands everyone bow down or face the furnace. But the young men stood firm, showing us what real faith looks like when it's tested by fire. And today we're going to be discussing what idols look like in the world, what it means to stand strong in our faith, and how God meets us in the flames of life. So let's get started. We're back with the one, the only, PB, Pastor Brian Hunt.
What is up, guys?
How's it going?
So glad to be here. And Heather, you were just saying when we just got before we started that big, just like cool stuff happening in students and kids, and you guys are like brainstorming about some new things. We're not, I don't know if we're announcing yet or anything, but just like super fun stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I'm pumped. We were working on, it seems far away, but all that camp planning stuff, and specifically preteen camp. But we're going to let T be the one to drop all that fun news, our kids director.
Would you say that T is going to spill the tea?
Boom.
Cha-ching, pa-ching.
There, I hope she listens to that.
Oh, we know that T does.
We also discussed, too, that it seems like all of California is under construction. So if you're anywhere in California listening to this, may the Lord be with you as you go to closed roads, blocked roads, redirections, tree cutting, all of it. So give yourself 20 extra minutes no matter where you're going.
And we're going to help you through it here. One red light at a time. Just take it in stride. It's
just one more train and you'll be able to finish this podcast.
That's right. These whole things are just effort. These are patience right now. This is patience.
Take all the effort.
So here we go.
All right. Hey, as we get started, can you kind of give us a sweeping overview of Daniel 3, maybe a few reminders of how we even got to where we're at in Daniel 3?
Yeah. So if you've been kind of following along, we're walking through the book of Daniel, and so we're in chapter 3, but man, a lot has taken place over chapters 1 and chapter 2. Really, the overarching thing to keep in mind is that Daniel is in the midst of being in Babylonian captivity. He and thousands of Jews were taken by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. And the reason being is that the people of God had sinned against God, and so God used Babylon to really teach the people of God a lesson. That captivity would last for 70 years. And when Daniel was taken into captivity, King Nebuchadnezzar had actually destroyed the city of Jerusalem, and he had taken some of the high-ranking noble officials and royalty to come into his service. Daniel and his three buddies, as we know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were the four of those people. For over a period of 3 years, they'd be trained in all things Babylon and their culture, their food, all of their linguistics, even in like things like astrology and things like that. They would be trained in those areas, and at the end of those 3 years, the top ones would be put into the king's service, and that's where we see that Daniel and his friends are really in situations and power and opportunities of influence and power for King Nebuchadnezzar. And so all of this kind of sets the stage for where we're at today, because King Nebuchadnezzar, as most kings were back then, was a little hoity-toity, thought a lot of himself, and loved all things power and influence, because, can't really blame him, Babylon was the king, he was the king of all kings. He was the Babylon of the most powerful city and region in the world, and so he could get whatever he wanted. And so as we kind of set the scene for Daniel 3, we kind of see where Daniel and his buddies have gone through this training. Daniel has even interpreted a dream for the king, saying, hey, bud, watch out. There's some kingdoms that are going to fall. You're going to be one of them. I would really be mindful of that. And that was what Preston had done last week. But now this week, as we kind of entered into Daniel 3, we're still looking at King Nebuchadnezzar, and he's continues to wrestle with what I would say his image and what he's trying to get accomplished in Babylon. And right in the middle of it are all of these the Jewish people that we're talking about today.
Oh, yeah. And we see that the king built this giant statue. Preston introduced it last week. If you watched him preach, he looked so small next to it. When it was behind him on the giant LED wall.
Yeah, massive.
Totally massive. And he, broke down like the big parts of the statue. Yeah. And that statue comes back to play in a really big way this week.
Yeah, well, he doesn't necessarily build it exactly as it was in the dream, but he certainly builds a statue, and it was not a small one, that's for sure.
And then we're talking about a passage now because you and I actually chatted a little bit.
Yeah.
There is a prophetic passage from an Old Testament book that is not Daniel that really correlates exactly with what's going on here in Daniel 3.
Well, as we talk about this statue, we're really talking about idols. And as I talked in the message, this whole idea that these little g gods that we have in our lives, that we expect to do these big g god things in our lives. But the reality is that they're just worldly things. And back then, they would actually have idols that they would make. And we read about that even in the book of Genesis, or really in Exodus, I should say, when the people of God leave Egypt and they're in the wilderness for a period of time. And Moses goes up on the mountains to get the 10 Commandments. And while he's up there communing with God, getting the law of God, the people are down in the valley making idols and pretending like those are the idols that actually got them out of Egypt. And it wasn't the God of the Bible. It was this golden calf that had miraculously come out of this fire after the people had thrown their gold in. And such a funny story with Aaron. But what Isaiah says in Isaiah 44 is really kind of a tongue-in-cheek look at these idols that these people are making. And really, I would hope that we too could apply it to our lives. And maybe it's not with brick and mortar or gold or plastic, but what are the other idols in our lives? So I just want to read Isaiah 44, 12 through 20. We'll kind of go at it a chunk at a time. But starting in verse 12, it says, "The blacksmith takes a tool and works with it in the coals. He shapes an idol with hammers. He forges it with the might of his arm. He gets hungry and loses his strength. He drinks snow water and grows faint. The carpenter measures with a line and makes an outline with a marker. He roughs it out with chisels and marks it with compasses. He shapes it in human form in all its glory, that it may dwell in a shrine." So he's talking about, if you're any sort of like craftsman, you know exactly what he's talking about. He's warming up the tools, he's getting them ready to be used, he's outlining everything, he's creating a template for this idol that he's about to make. And it says that he's even hungry and thirsty, but he's so consumed with his work that he decides to not drink any water, and he grows faint in doing it, and he's working so hard. Then in verse 14 it says he cuts down cedars, or perhaps took a cypress or oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest. He planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. It is used as fuel for the burning. Some of it he takes and warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread, but he also fashions a god and worships it. He makes an idol and bows down to it. Half of the wood he burns in the fire. Over he prepares his meal. He roasts his meat and eats his fill. He also warms himself and says, I'm warm. I see fire. From the rest he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, "Save me, you are my God." So you can, such vivid imagery. You know what I mean? You've got this guy, you can imagine him out in the woods, and he's cutting down trees, and he's using this fire for 3 different things. If you notice, it was to warm himself, to bake some food, both of which are totally fine. God would make that to be honorable. But then he takes it and he actually starts to craft this idol out of it. He's using something that God had created for good, and he's making something evil out of it. And all of these little things are just kind of taking place. And at the end of it, his belly is full, his hands are warm, but at the end he worships this idol that he had made. He says, "Save me." He says, "You are my God," except for the fact that the God of the universe is the one that made the tree and created the fire and gave him life and gave him all of these things. He's overlooking it for this God that he had just made. And he says they know nothing in verse 18. They know nothing. They understand nothing. Their eyes isn't this great, are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds closed so they cannot understand. He says in verse 19, no one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or understanding to say, half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow down to this is so great. Should I bow down to a block of wood? That's what it is.
Yep.
He says in verse 20, such a person feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself or say, is not this thing in my right hand a lie? It's just such beautiful imagery for us to think about. And Isaiah the prophet, God speaking through him, just saying, hey, all this stuff that you're making, all these idols that are in your life, they literally have plastered over eyes. They can't see. They have no minds to understand. Only the God of the universe can actually do what you're asking this to do, and that is to save you. And yet we see time and time again that we do these things in our lives, these little idols. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but
Yep.
the reality is that I just think that God was warning the people in such vivid imagery about the dangers of what this could be. And I think he's done the same thing for us. But yet, here we are in Daniel chapter 3, looking at this massive statue that Nebuchadnezzar is building and walking directly into what Isaiah is about to tell him.
Yeah, and Isaiah warned us, right? Like, don't use good things, don't turn them into God things, and
Yeah.
use it for its intended purpose. And
Yeah.
then you shared with us that the statue Nebuchadnezzar built was massive.
Yeah.
It was like a 7-8 story tall building covered in
Insane.
gold. And I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I was
Yeah.
reading that having the head of gold could suggest that Nebuchadnezzar was trying to immortalize his reign. I know when Preston broke down, it was about the different
Yeah.
locations on Earth. Is there any truth that he was trying to immortalize his reign, or is that just
Well, and I think that
Telltale.
there's a potential for that.
Okay.
Some scholars might agree with that. The majority of the scholars that I read kind of felt like that probably wasn't necessarily
Okay.
true, and just for a couple of reasons that they would say, and I tend to agree that wouldn't necessarily be a full statue of him. First is
Gotcha.
that in Mesopotamia at the time, the kings wouldn't typically actually make statues of themselves.
Okay.
And because the statues would be reserved for the lower G gods, the gods of these. So, and if you remember, even the names that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were given were these polytheistic names of Nebo and all of this. So the moon god and the sun god and different gods like that. So the statues for the gods, what they were there for, they were meant to be a physical representation of this immortal being that was there. So it was like, I
Okay.
got something to grab onto. This is the Nebu, whatever, the statue, so I can look at it. So the statue was that visual reminder, and a lot of the some of the main idols that we see and the people that things worship, we read about them in the Bible all the time. There's Bel, there's Baal, there's Asherah, there's Marduk. All of those, they have different things that you would worship. So, for instance, Asherah, you'll read throughout where the Asherah poles were set up,
yeah.
and all of those terrible things that would happen at that. But there was this pole that would draw them to it to remember Asherah and worship her there. So the king, the difference, the reason that I don't think it was the king was because since the king was alive, if he thought he was a god, he would just have the people worship him directly and not indirectly through a statue.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
So that's really where the whole idea that I believe that this statue was of something else, maybe not of Nebuchadnezzar directly. And also, it was an interesting dimension if you think about it. It's 90 feet by like 12 feet or something. So it's a really skinny, really tall statue. It's just like this like pillar in the middle of it says on the plains of where the plains, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but in the plains where like a military encampment or something it might have been. So it could have been. I mean, we weren't there, but every kind of historically, and as I read some historians, I think it may have been just an image to remember a new god.
Okay, so definitely an idol versus idolizing him.
That's how I read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Why do you think we sometimes skim past important details like this in the Bible and don't
Yeah.
wrestle with them, just kind of read it and move on?
Yeah, because even like that, like to stop and because I think it was 60 cubits by 6 cubits or something like that. What it was. So you could really just kind of go past that and be like, okay, whatever, keep moving on. So why do we do that? And let's just be honest. I do it. You do it. We all have those
Agreed.
moments. But here's as I think about it, I think it's one, I think sometimes we read the Bible for quantity instead of quality. That we're just trying to burn through it just to be able to check the box, click the button on our app, whatever it may be. We just want quantity instead of quality. That's why sometimes, and I'm not saying don't do this, I'm just saying where reading through the Bible in a year can sometimes not be as impactful as maybe you want it to be, because in some cases, you're reading quantity instead of quality. You've got these big, long stretches of scripture you got to read in order to stay on track. You probably experienced that before.
Yep, been there.
And on my sabbatical, which was interesting, having more time, I was able to read longer sections of scripture, but I also had longer time to digest it. So I didn't feel rushed. So quantity over quality is one. I think another thing is that we just go through the motions. It's just like, well, it's Bible time. Here we go. Did my app. Here we go. And you're not really thinking about what you're reading. You're thinking about what's on the other end, my to-do list. I'm going to school. I've got the thing, and I'm just kind of going through the motions. Then the third one I think is, I think we assume we know what's happening in the text because we apply our Western mindset to the text.
Oh, so much.
Right.
So
I mean,
much.
you know what I mean? So maybe you're reading a story. Maybe it's not even a Bible story. When an author writes a story, he's going to assume that the audience in some ways is going to be able to fill in the blanks for cultural relevant stuff, especially if it's like not a period piece, or maybe it's like in today's day piece. You'll be able to say, oh, I know what a car is. I know what this is. I know what this. But the problem is, as the book ages, the audience that's now reading it can't assume that anymore. They have to actually ask themselves questions. So that's like when we read the Iliad, or we read something that is from ancient Greece, or like we have to ask ourselves, well, what is that? The original audience probably would be like, oh, well, that's that.
It was so clear to them.
Yeah. So now, so for us, we just apply Western mindset to ancient biblical times and say, oh, they got to be the same. And they're not. So we just assume, and unfortunately, we know what happens when you do that.
Yes.
Another thing I think is that I think that we believe, as we read the Bible, we say, dude, that's too complex. I can't understand that. And so what we do is we dismiss ourselves from thinking we'd ever be, quote unquote, smart enough to be able to understand the text. Like, we'll just burn through it. And it's a total trick of the devil. Because, I mean, if a dumb jock like me can understand some of this stuff, believe me, you can too. So don't believe for a second you can't understand it. It just means you have to take time to learn to understand it. And as I said in the message, that you might have read the scripture, but you didn't read the scripture, right? So the difference there, just making sure that you just take the time. Another thing is, I think we're too afraid to ask questions. So we might bump into something and we're not sure what it is, but we don't want to look dumb, and so we stay in the dark. And so, you know what I mean?
Yep. That makes total sense.
And I think, students or even people that I talk to, I think sometimes people will limit how quickly they can grow in their faith by that single thing, that they don't get it, but they don't want to look dumb. So they'd rather not get it and not look dumb instead of getting it and maybe looking a little foolish at first.
Risk it.
And so then their growth is stunted. And I'll just say the final thing. I think the last thing is, I think we're just lazy. That's just straight up. Like, I think we're just lazy sometimes, guys. And the Bible is much more accessible than you make it out to be if you just would take the time to look at some things. So,
yeah, I agree with all of those.
Yeah. Anyone that you'd add? I'm curious.
No, I mean, those are all in the vein and even more than what I thought. But I hadn't even thought of the Western mindset. But I know that I do that all the time. Like, if this is taking place in Babylon, I couldn't remember where that was. So I looked it up and I was like, modern day Baghdad, like, we're talking Iraq.
Right.
And it's so easy if you've only ever lived, in Northern America, to just, you picture it somewhere here and you're like, that's not it at all.
Yeah.
So some of the references, you have to consider where it was from, the time.
Yeah.
You have to dig into it to get the full effect.
Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes I think when we don't, maybe we knowingly do this, but I think we create a different world in which the Bible actually took place in. Like, it's not modern day Baghdad. It's like Narnia from like C.S. Lewis, or it's like a Harry Potter world or something. And we think, oh, well, we're just creating this little fairy tale land until, as we've said so many times, until you go to Israel. And you say, like, oh,
in your face, yeah.
That's the thing that they talked about in the thing, and that's the exact thing. Oh, right. So one example of that for me was when there's the epic battle on Mount Carmel in the Bible, where you have Elijah, and he's going up against the prophets of Baal, and as he's going against them, he eventually he defeats the prophets of Baal, and it says that all of a sudden Queen Jezebel is angry at him and wants to kill him, and so it says that he tucks his robe underneath him, and he runs as fast as he can, and he outruns a chariot. Do you remember this? Yeah?
Yes.
And so in your mind you're thinking, well, gosh, this must just be like straight desert. He's just hauling. You can see the tuft of smoke behind him as he's going, until you go to Mount Carmel, and you get to Mount Carmel, and you realize this whole thing is like a mountain, and there's shrubs everywhere, and there's greenery, and it's like it's crazy. It's like it's hard to hike, if you would. And then to think he's sprinting through it. So it changed that whole story for me if you know the actual context of it. So I would just encourage people, just like very, very easily, just Google the location of where they're talking, just so you have the right mindset and know these are real places. This isn't Narnia. Like, it's a real place. So
yeah, and the same words written to the people of then are applying to us now, because
Amen.
in your sermon you discussed little gods that we bow down to in everyday life. And what do you shared some, but what are some examples of modern day idols that we
Yeah.
might not even realize we're worshiping.
Well, the list is so long, and I can mention a
limit does
few,
not
but
exist.
my goodness, like one that just stuck out to me is our health, and I think sometimes it's good to be healthy. It's good to work out. It's good to eat healthy. All of that's good. But I know some people where it could become their little g god. Like it becomes everything that they think about, and they will sacrifice at the altar of Gold's Gym instead of, you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
there's this sense. So anything, and a pastor once said that you can take anything, make a good thing a God thing, and that's a bad thing. And so that's so health. I think also our appearance. I don't think it's a bad thing to shower and to shave and be put together. I highly recommend that. I think it's a good thing.
10 out of 10 recommend.
But my goodness, how much money do we spend billion-dollar industry on plastic surgeries and all this different things to be able to make sure your appearance is just right? And parents, let's just be honest, are kids. They can be little idols to us.
Yep.
What they do, how well they're doing, how is little Johnny doing, and we'll make sure that we bow our knee to them for the food that we eat, the vacations we go on. Little G gods. And it's not fair to them. They didn't ask for that. We're making it them out to be. Another one, earmuffs. If you're a kid out there, or parents don't want to hear it. It's our sex life, right? Our sex life, I think, could become a little g god because we make that the most important thing in our lives, and it does terrible things to people where pornography becomes part of it, or just infidelity, and so sex can be part of that. Social media, huge god. I think we are seeing in our culture now, based on what's happening, how powerful this social media is, and we are.
Yep.
Maybe just a little bit learning that this is dangerous. And as I think about my son, who's an 8th grader right now, that has no social media whatsoever, and the one that's actually encouraging us not to have him have social media is his older sister, who's a junior in high school, who says, "Wait as long as you can. You don't need that stuff." Like, it's you could start to see where our next generation can even start to see the problems with it, or to the extent that the people that create the social media apps that we're looking at refuse to let their kids look on the very app that they're making.
Yep. That,
You know?
I mean, if that doesn't tell you something.
Yeah, I mean, and those are few. I mean, you got any you think of like?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm kind of thinking middle school, high school, young adult.
Of course, yeah.
Anytime your identity becomes the number one thing in your life, and not your identity found in Christ, but who you are as a person, regardless of what aspect of that you're looking at, when you put that number one, you just move everything out of order. And it just, when what you're fighting for isn't God first, then it's not going to go well.
And boy, isn't it hard though for our students?
Yep.
Like, I mean, the pressure that they're under to
voices
sure,
at him from every direction. We just had company over this week, and I was talking with one of Sean's friends, and we have a friend who's got a toddler who's teething, and we both were like, "Oh, thank God that that's not us."
Yeah.
Then we went on to say, wasn't it a gift for us? I'm 46 to grow up without social media, without a smartphone, because the comparisons I made were so much smaller than the comparisons that people make to others. And you were talking about appearance, and like 10 years ago, the stat was already that a kid often takes 75 selfies before they decide which one to post. Because
10 years ago?
10 years ago, that was the stat.
I didn't know that.
I'm thinking of a girl right now who's like 24, and I remember, teaching that to her when she was in middle school. And I'm like, I just think it's gotten worse. Plus, there's filters and all these things. So we just, a lot of times, anything about our appearance and our identity, if that is what you're fixated on, then you're not, your mind's not fixed on Christ.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and also really sad.
And sad,
It's super sad.
So how do we spot these subtle statues, if you will, in our life to do something about them before they take God's place?
Well, I would come back to what theologian Paul Tillich said. I quoted him in the message where he says, "A person's God, little g God, is the thing or person that one is most concerned about, thinks the most about, or affects one's life the most."
Okay.
And so let's just break that down. And really, you can break it down in a series of questions. You could simply ask yourself right now, as you're waiting with the train or riding down the road, you could simply ask yourself, what makes me the most worried or concerned in my life? Right. So if we use Paul's definition that the person or God is the thing or person that one is most concerned about, thinks about the most, affects one's life the most, what makes me the most worried or concerned in my life? And we could you and I could probably do that. what makes me get nervous? Like, what causes me concern? And that might be a little God in your life. Number two, what do I tend to think about the most throughout the day? So are you
Ooh, yeah.
fixated on your kids all the time? What are they doing? How are they doing? And of course there's seasons where you want it, maybe it's a test they're taking, but like fixated on like throughout the day. Are you on your phone all the time watching their location to see exactly where they're at? Like just what do you tend to think about the most throughout the day? Is it the sales? Is it how much you're making? Is it you could fill in the blank. And then the last thing, what will cause me or what will cause you to act the quickest when I have the chance? So what is going to get you out of your seat and you're going to say, boom, I'm going. I'm going to do that thing. And here's just like a small little subtle one that I think just goes by people's like minds so quickly. And I know that you've experienced it. I know I experienced it. Yeah, even in my house, I experienced it. You could be having a conversation with somebody. You're in the middle of the conversation. The other person gets a notification on their phone that they got a text message. And all of a sudden what happens? They go right to the phone, like mid-sentence. Mid-sentence, they'll just go right to the phone. There's a Pavlovian response that when that thing goes off, I will respond to it immediately. And I just think that could be a little G God. Like if that overwhelms you to the point that you will stop human interaction to go to this thing that's in your hand and sometimes forget about what you were just speaking about, or like really be so rude to a person that you would say, this thing in my hand is more important than you right now. I think you might have a little G God in your hands. And so, again, Paul's definition, one more time, a person's God is the thing or person that one is most concerned about, thinks the most about, and affects one's life the most. Think about that. Ask yourself those questions. Think it'll poke around at some things in your life.
We could just stop right there and let people ponder. We have more, but that's a good spot if you need to pause.
Yeah, dead air and podcasts are not good.
Pause that right now if you need to just work through those three questions. But for us, we're going to move on. We've got a few more chunks of verses we want to go through. So Daniel chapter 3, verse 4 through 7. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and people of every language, this is what you're commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, not sure, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and the people of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And you mentioned in your message that they were to just stop exactly what they were doing, bow down to the massive image of gold that would most likely be seen from miles away. And this is interesting, and I'm not sure if we've talked about it on here, but I remember touring Israel.
Yeah.
The music went off. Everyone who was Muslim was working. They stopped. They rolled out kind of like a carpet, yoga mat style thing. And then they all started bowing and worshiping. I don't know the exact time of day that it was, but it happened several times. And everyone else carried on business as usual. And everyone who was Muslim started bowing, and they were intentionally facing a certain direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even Hasidic Jews, you probably experienced that in Israel too. I mean, I experienced it on the plane where a Hasidic Jew, like at a certain time throughout the day, they will face the Western Wailing Wall, whatever direction that will be, or Jerusalem, whatever way that would be. And they'll usually rock back and forth. They'll repeat prayers. So there is a little bit of that too. But if you add in the music component, you're right. The Muslim faith definitely has that. So for sure.
Yeah, it was just so interesting to watch it, which is crazy. I think you boiled it down to bow down or die.
Well, that's what they said. I mean, that was when this comes to the people, they had this the option: you either bow down or you die, and that was and that was just the commonplace for the people of the day. Like that's what you did. And this fiery furnace, I do think it's ironic. Going back to your question of are you reading the text, or have you read the text kind of thing? Did you ever ask yourself what the furnace was used for? Like, where did the furnace come from? Why would they have the furnace? Well, the reason is they just built a 7 to 8 story idol on a plane, and so they probably cast all of the stuff in that furnace. And so these guys are going to be thrown into a furnace that was used for an idol. So
as an idol-making furnace, you refuse to worship the idol, we'll just burn you to death in the furnace.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yep. Yep.
So we see that the people of Babylon are bowing down to this statue really with seemingly without hesitation, and it was just another god to them. How does that mirror maybe the pressure that we might feel in today's culture to just go along with what everyone else is doing or what everyone else deems as, well, this is acceptable, so you're just going with the flow?
Well, you need to talk about some students here in a second.
Gosh,
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But adults, guys, we're not off the hook, are we? I mean, let's just think like we think of like, hey, who's going on what vacation, and how can I do that too? Even though I know I can't afford it, but I don't want them to think that I can't go on a vacation they can't go on, and yada yada yada. And who's got the new toy? Oh, I got to get the bigger truck. If I don't get the bigger truck and it's not lifted, I won't be able to live in Escalon anymore, and like yada yada yada, all this stuff. And what new thing is out there that I quote unquote need? I don't. It's not that I want it; it's that I need it. I need the bigger TV. Football starting again. If I'm going to have people over, I need a bigger TV. How many likes did I get in that picture? Does it count? Was the selfie right? Was the angle right? Was the golden hour right? Did I get a lot? Asking ourselves these crazy questions that people literally ask now, which I can't believe is part of our vernacular. How can my video go viral? Like what do I got to do? Who do I got to put it in their hands of? And but then even in a broader sense, I would say like we see this sort of acceptance, this idea of I've got to do what everybody's doing like politically. Man, how can I be on the this side of the politics so that I can make sure that I have the either least amount of resistance or the most friends, or we don't want to be canceled, so we're going to follow what everybody else is saying. So what's that celebrity saying, or what's that pundit saying? I got to follow them, or we don't, or this. You may not want to rock the boat with your parents. So instead of like speaking up for truth, that's right. You just avoid a fight, and you'll believe this idea of I'm going to honor my mother and father. That's what the God says. Well, honoring your father and mother doesn't mean that you do dumb things that your parents are asking you to do. That you honor God first and don't honor your parents. So there's so many different ones. But what about you? I mean, you're thinking about kids and students, just life in general. What do you
just think it's so easy in life to wear a mask, to be this chameleon, to be who you need to be in the situation you need to be. And I think there's one thing about being a flexible person and understanding like I'm in an environment right now that I don't know a lot. That's okay to admit I don't know a lot. Maybe I speak less, ask more questions, who knows?
Yep.
But I don't think faking it till you make it is healthy when it comes to life. I think it's different to say, I'm all in because I want to learn this sport, or I'm all in because I want to be the best artist I can be. So I'm going to act like a great artist and learn great things versus pretending, and I just think there's a lot of pretending that goes on so that we appear in certain lights. You mentioned the TV thing.
Yeah.
I think the biggest returns of the year at Costco are TVs after Super Bowl Sunday, because everyone wants to have a good Super Bowl party and no one thinks their TV's good enough. So they buy a TV, put it up on the wall, do all that work, which that sounds like a nightmare to me. Okay, that's not my jam to level it, get it on the wall. And if it's off, I will notice it every day for the rest of my life. So it has to be exact. And then they just return it, all for their friends having a good weekend. And like, that's great. But you could easily go to Chili's or BJ's or any restaurant and watch it too, and just pay for your meal and not pay $4,000 and then return that. And it's wild what we want people to see in us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just what you said. What we want somebody to see in us, we will do at any cost to be able to make sure that image that we think. Now, this is the crazy part. We think we're creating an image that those people are going to have in their minds, like that we're going to create, but we don't know the image that they have of us in our minds. Like,
true, yeah.
They might walk in and say, "That's the most ridiculous TV I've ever seen in my life. That is completely inappropriate. Why would you ever do that?" Like, that's the image that they have. But in our mind, our image is like, "Dude, they think I'm awesome. That TV's amazing, right?"
And it's wild when we don't step back, set our own priorities for our life, and decide what's important and do things on purpose.
Right.
All of a sudden, unintentionally, we have just let everybody around us, or everyone we've opened up brain space for, whether it's social media, TV, local friends, whatever, we just let them decide for us. And they're probably not even telling us to do that. We're just following suit, versus if you say, I want to live my life a certain way, I want my family to look a certain way, I want us to honor God, then I better set up some priorities and boundaries in my home and with my family, because otherwise I'm just out there bowing down to gods that don't matter too, and it hasn't even clocked.
100%. Yeah. Well, and
Scary.
if you want practical ways to actually like do that in your life, come back to your priorities. Like know your priorities, God, spouse, kids, everything else. And if you believe that those are your priorities, then you will not sacrifice at the altar of anything other than God, spouse, kids. Like you stay focused on what is true.
Yep.
And people, we are not held responsible for the thoughts or opinions of others on our life. We are held responsible to how we honor and love God in our life. That's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing. Like throughout Scripture, you see, like I could care less what people think. All I care about is what God says. 1 Corinthians 4, that whole chapter just rocked my world when it came to my sabbatical, just this idea of who are we really caring the most about as a leader, as an individual. And so if you want practical ways, like first and foremost, honor God with your life. Want what he wants more in your life more than anything else. Respect and love your spouse if you're married. Love them well. Don't let them become ahead of God. Love them well. For your kids' sake, love your spouse well. Have a great relationship with Jesus. Give them an example of what it looks like to follow him. And then when you get to the everything else bucket, which is your social media, your work, your job, your hobbies, all the other things else, now you have filtered all of those things through those top 3 things that are most important to you, and you can look at them differently because you know what's most important. You know where your life comes from. So I think it's really important. Keep those pyramid priorities in line.
Oh, absolutely. Daniel 3 in 13 through 15, we see that Nebuchadnezzar is just absolutely ticked. It says he's filled with rage because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that they were not bowing down. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of the God I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn," goes on to say all of the instruments.
I wanted you to say them again. That was going to be fun.
All right, fine. The horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all the kinds of music. If you're ready to fall down and worship the God I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?
Yeah. Well, let's keep in mind something that we learned back in chapter 1 is that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had gained a great deal of favor with the king.
Yes.
And they were influential. They were important. They were the best of the best. So even though he was certainly furious, he gives them an out. Like he actually doesn't want this to happen because says, is it true? Like he wants to know if like this is tracking because he wants what they offer him probably more than losing them kind of thing. And so he says, listen, here's your chance. Just bow down. But as I said in the message, you have to remember that if they refuse to bow down to the statue, they will lose their life. But if they choose to bow down to the statue, they will lose their faith. Like that was the crux of the moment there. And so for us, and here's the sad part. And I just believe this to be true. There's probably a lot of Christians that would bow down to the statue, that call themselves Christians, that would bow down to the statue instead of lose their life. I just because there's this human part of us that when you are threatened with your life, you get worried and you see the finite life that we have and lose sight of the infinite light that awaits us. And in some cases, I think that people that might check the box that say they're Christians, they would just simply say, you know what, I'm gonna call this one an L, and I'll get him next time, and I'm gonna bow down, and we'll figure it out later, kind of thing. And I think that that's really sad because I think our world is getting to a point where Christians need to be stronger and not look for the next battle. They need to fight the battles that are in front of them, that God's provided them, and they need to stand up for what they believe.
And we get that great example here because they actually reply to the king and they say, "We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Oof, that gives me chills.
Let's go, preach it.
Reading that now. So they're telling the king, our God can deliver us, but even if he does not. So what does that kind of faith look like in real life today? What does it take for us to have the faith that these men are exempling here?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like hot right now, getting excited with that.
Go.
Like I got the war paint on and all the things because that is just this sense of it reminds me very much of David's speech to Goliath in that valley right before, you come at me with sword and
Yep.
spear, I come at you with right. It's just this, if you're looking for some speeches to memorize to get you fired up before you go to work, do that one. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and David. But how do we get there? How do we become that? Here I'm going to break this down to the simplest point.
Okay.
It's this. We become those men and women of faith when we have a complete belief that Jesus is who he says he is. That we, through and through, we just believe that with every part of our being. That because if we truly believe that Jesus defeated death for us on the cross, that that the tomb is empty, that that our eternity can be secure because of his grace and his mercy that we don't deserve, but that he gives us freely, and that we receive that, that then we don't have anything to worry about in this life. Like, nothing to worry about. If there is any fear that every human being should have, it is not spiders, it is not alligators, it is not cats. It is the fact of what happens to me when I die.
Yeah.
And if you know the answer to that question, the rest of your life takes on a completely different focus. Now, this doesn't mean that we're complete jerks to everybody around us. You know what I mean? Like, and we're just a jerk. We pull the grace card and be like, "See, God's covering me." No, that's dumb. Paul would blow that whole thing up in Romans chapter 6. Read that slow and understand what I mean by that. But what it does mean is that we can walk through this life with more confidence in our faith, knowing that whatever happens to us, it's only temporary, because our mission in this life is not to just endure our life and then eventually pass away like the flowers in the field. It is to be bold. It is to be bold for Jesus in how we live, how we love. We are to tell the world about him, his grace, his love that is for everyone, and to take advantage of every opportunity that we have. And I believe that if and when we actually believe that, whether it's a student, whether it's a single mom, whether it's somebody that's been retired forever, whether you've been married for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, like if you start to believe that through and through, then you just start to do things differently and live differently.
Yeah, and we see that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they are like, no, we are believing in the one true God, because Nebuchadnezzar ends up in verses 19 through 23, gets so much more upset. His attitude changes. He orders the furnace how much times hotter? Seven times. Gets some of the strongest soldiers, ties them up, throws them into the blazing furnace. And then it says, so these men wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king command was so urgent that the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the three men firmly tied. They fell into the blazing furnace, like they burned up.
Yeah, it's so intense, and there's so much we can talk about. And but the reality of this is that this is real. This is real talk, right? This really happened. This is real. And I said that I think he turned up the heat on the furnace to match the heat that he was furious with, and because he was that mad. And these men that were so committed to the king and his gods actually lost their lives as they pushed these men in, and yet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego find themselves potentially with that same fate. And as they said before, we'll go in there, because he will save us, but even if he does not, we're not going to follow through. I mean, is anything like that resonate with you? Anything in your life that you've been thinking about?
Yeah. So back when we adopted, which I've touched on in here before, and it only felt hard. It only felt chaotic, and it didn't feel good at all. I painted this slab of wood, and I use the term painted. Give me some grace there, because an artist I am not.
Grace given.
But I made the sign that said, and if not, he is still good. And it just was in our living room for probably, 7 or 8 years, because I needed to be able to just look at it every day and remind myself, okay, if not, he's still good. If the situation doesn't ever magically turn wonderful with a bow on top, which it never did, if it never ends up just in the way we always dreamed when we thought, okay, we're adopting, he's still good. And he is still good. But it was definitely him in the fire with us, not him saving us from the fire.
Man.
So.
Well, and you said that he's in the fire with you. Like that's pretty powerful. And I mean, what we read in Daniel 3:24 through 25 is exactly that. The king Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Like that's your moment, right? You read that. What hits you on that? When you're reading that, and that just probably is your
you're not
living
alone.
room all alone, right?
What I thought would burn me up into pieces, our family up into pieces, didn't, you know? And the miracle is that we're still standing, walking through what felt like the hardest road ever. God was there with us. He didn't wait for us to cross to get to the other side.
Yeah.
We weren't alone.
Yeah, it reminds you of Deuteronomy 31:6, at least for me, where God says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you." Here's those words that we always need. He'll never leave you, nor forsake you. And what something I actually love about that text is this. I actually love that it says that the king said that he saw them. Did you catch it? Walking around in the fire, like there's like just subtle things. Why is that a big deal? Why do we take our time through the text? Because it shows that they weren't struggling.
Yeah, they're not hiding in the corner crying.
Yeah, they're not trying to like gut it out until God gets them through this. Like they were walking. I mean, they were walking with, and I believe that 4th in the fire would be Jesus, and that Jesus in the midst of their battle, he was with them too. They didn't need to worry because Jesus had taken care of all the fear, all the anxiety out of that moment, and they were just they were in complete peace that God was with them. And so I know that there are some people right now that are in fires, and whether it's a medical fire, whether it's something that's just in their life, and I just want you to, maybe this is that moment that you just stop struggling and that you just start to realize that God's walking with you and asking the question, maybe not like, why is this happening to me? But how are you teaching me, God? How are you walking with me in the middle of the fire? So that not just so that I can get through this, whatever that may be, but that the people on the outside looking in at this fire that I'm in can see me not struggling, necessarily with my faith, but walking with you, Jesus. And might that be an encouragement to them?
Yeah, and I would have, how hard would it have been to be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but what an encouragement that is to us today to know that in biblical times, we don't read back and everything's perfect, like they're in the flames. And then a miracle is happening, right? Because Nebuchadnezzar approaches the opening of the blazing furnace. Shout, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. And you just said, there's no other way to describe it. It's a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, they should... Yeah, I mean, all the things that they're wearing, all the, if you look at the worldly things that they had on, the only way they could survive that is with God moving in that moment. And again, not only did God save them, but as I just kind of alluded to a second ago, Nebuchadnezzar's watching this, and this has an impact on him also. And I mentioned that there was a kind of a top to the furnace, and there was like a window to the furnace. So the guys probably went through the top, landed on the ground, and they walked out the bottom, because that way Nebuchadnezzar could see them. And as they walked out, as we read just a second ago, Nebuchadnezzar was changed in a pretty profound way. So.
Yeah, verse 28 says, "Praise be to God, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and they are willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god," so lowercase god, "except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way."
I do think that's powerful, but I do think it's funny too, that he was so close.
Burn him up. He's into fire, man.
Yeah, but note again. Let's come back to where we started this whole episode, like slowing down and reading the text. Listen to how he describes God, though. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar says, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." Not him. right? He says that they
Their
trusted in
God.
him, right? He says, now I declare to the people of any nation and language, they say anything against the God of Shadrach. So it is
Good point.
all about he has not internalized this faith or said, I am done with all these other gods. I'm going to only believe in your God. Stay tuned. We're coming up to some fun stuff with that. But in this moment, he's starting the process because he's able to see. But right now, he's just saying, yeah, that's your God. I've got my own gods. There's a lot of people out there right now that I think are in the middle of fire, and you're like, I'm going to keep my gods, and you're burning, and you're in the midst of some serious pain, and God is saying, I'd like to be in that fire with you, not because he may not take it away. He may not take it. There's so many martyrs throughout history that God didn't take the pain away, and they lost their lives because of it. So this isn't about health and wealth and do the right thing and your life will be perfect. This is about you need somebody in the fire with you. And that you need to find purpose through your pain, and that you need to find that in the midst of your fire, right? I reminded us that don't fear fire that was meant to form your faith. That we shouldn't be afraid of fires when we have our faith with us, because it's always going to form us into something greater if we allow God to do that. I know that people listening right now, you probably are saying, man, PB, you don't know like what I'm going through, and maybe I don't. And Heather, you probably don't. We might know some people, but we don't know all people. And so in the middle of that, you could hear words like this, and it could seem really shallow, and it could seem really like distant. But for a couple people that have walked through fires ourselves, and we can say that it might not be the same fire, but it certainly was hot. We would not have gotten through those had it not been for God. And just knowing your guys' story without Christ in your life. I know you've said it. I don't know how people do it. And
I don't.
And so for people out there, I just want you to say, I just want to hear me say this, that if you are holding on to those little g gods with you, they will melt in the fire with you because they won't withstand it. But if you hold on to the God of the Bible, if you hold on to Jesus, he'll be with you. And you won't just have him hanging on with you. He's going to be walking with you. And I want that for you so desperately. And God wants that for you so desperately. So I would just invite you, if you have not yet received Christ, trust him fully with your life and let him walk through the fire with you.
Yeah. Let him walk through the fire with you. What an incredible reminder that faith really isn't about avoiding the fire, but trusting God right in the middle of it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showed us that God is with us, whether he rescues us or calls us to stand firm in the flames.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to our long podcast today. We just had so much
we
wanted to talk about.
Thanks, guys.
If this episode encouraged you, we just would encourage you to share it with a friend. Maybe they might need some faith for the fire that they're walking through. And remember, don't fear a fire that's meant to form your faith. Check out the show notes. More information regarding today's conversation below. We don't have Brian next week. He's bringing in
Pastor Ed. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. So join us same time, same place next week. God bless you guys.
Tag You're It. Thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you next weekend at Crossroads on campus or online for one of our 4 weekend services. To view our service times, make sure you check out our website at crossroadsgrace.org. Tag You're It.